Today, we're diving into a chilling piece of folklore for you, a story that really weaves together the absolute depths of human cruelty with the unstoppable power of supernatural revenge. Just think about that for a second. That one question, well, it's the heart of our whole story today. It's a pretty haunting thought, right? And it sets the stage for a legend that was born not just from tragedy, but from a mother's bond so strong it refuses to be broken, even by death itself. So our story takes us to a small village called Belapur. Now by day, it's like any other quiet, unassuming place. But when night falls, a whole different feeling takes over. A deep-seated fear grips the community, and it all comes from a local legend and a very real, very dark secret.
Can you picture it? The dead of night, this ancient, sprawling peepal tree, and there, the apparition of a weeping mother. This is the ghost that haunts Belapur. But to really understand the ghost, we have to go back. We have to understand the woman.
Yeah, before she was a spirit, she was a woman. Her name was Angela. And her story, it doesn't start with supernatural horror. It starts with something much more common, and maybe even scarier. Brutal, everyday human cruelty.
For eight long years, Anjali's life was a living hell. Right from the very beginning of her marriage, she realized she wasn't a daughter-in-law, she was a servant. The abuse was constant, and it wasn't just from her husband, Raghuvir. It was his parents, too. And the twisted reason for all their cruelty? Her inability to have a child.
And listen, these weren't just some nasty whispers behind closed doors. Oh no, her mother-in-law would yell these things, making sure the neighbors heard every word. She turned Anjali's private agony into public shame. Those insults became her entire identity in that village.
And the cruelty, it was so calculated. Whenever Anjali's own parents would visit, her father-in-law would spin this story about a doctor who had supposedly confirmed that Anjali was the problem. It was a total lie. There was no doctor, there was no test. It was just a vicious lie, cooked up to isolate her and give them an excuse for their abuse.
So you can imagine, this one thought, it became her only hope. The one thing she held on to during the beatings and the insults. She honestly, truly believed that if she could just have a child, she could finally earn her place, maybe end the torment, and maybe, just maybe, find a tiny bit of love.
And then the impossible happened. That desperate prayer she had, it was answered. But what should have been this incredible blessing, it just became the trigger for the final, horrific chapter of her life.
Yeah, after 5 years of this nightmare, a doctor confirmed it. She was going to be a mother. In that one moment, looking at herself in the mirror, she saw a real smile on her face for the first time in ages. She thought, finally, this is it. Everything is going to change.
But that joy, it was shattered almost immediately. Because this was her family's reaction. They didn't see a daughter-in-law carrying their grandchild. They saw an incubator. They wanted the heir, not her. The plan was literally to take the baby and then just get rid of her. That tiny moment of hope she had was a complete illusion.
You'd think they would at least take care of the vessel carrying their precious heir, right? But no, the abuse didn't just continue, it got worse. They'd feed her stale leftovers, if she got fed at all, and still forced her to do all the heavy chores. Her body was literally wasting away, even as this new life was growing inside her.
All of this relentless cruelty builds and builds until it explodes in one final terrible act of violence. An act so brutal, it just rips a hole between the world of the living and the world of the dead.
And it all ended over something as trivial as cold food. Her husband, Raghuvir, drunk and furious, just unleashed this savage beating while his parents stood by and watched. Her very last words were a plea, not for herself, but for her baby. And when she finally fell silent on the floor, the family's only response was relief. Good, they said. The trouble is over.
There was no grief, no mourning, just a cover-up. To avoid any questions, they denied her the final dignity of a proper funeral. Raghuvir dragged her body out into a field and buried her in a shallow, unmarked grave, her hands still wrapped protectively around her stomach. Okay, so this is absolutely critical to understanding what happens next. In Indian folklore, the spirit of a pregnant woman who dies a violent death, a Garbhavati Atma, is considered one of the most powerful and one of the most tragic of all supernatural beings. Her spirit isn't just angry,
It's anchored to our world by this deep, unresolved need to protect the child she never got to meet.
Just 3 nights after her murder, it began. First, the sound of a phantom baby crying filled the house. Soon, that turned into screams of agony, ghostly sightings, and a fear so paralyzing that the 3 murderers started sleeping in the same locked room. And the horror wasn't just inside the house anymore. It was spilling out into the village.
And this brings us to the final act of vengeance and the eternal tragedy that follows. This is where we learn that some spirits, they just can't be reasoned with. They can't be appeased. One night, as the 3 of them were hiding in that room, an unseen force sealed their fate. They were suffocated, unable to even scream for help. Anjali's spirit had finally exacted her revenge. By morning, all 3 of them were found dead.
The villagers, now completely terrified, brought in an expert, a tantric, who confirmed what they already feared. He told them to give Anjali the funeral she was denied, so they exhumed her body, they performed the last rites, and they even made offerings of her favorite things from when she was a little girl, all in the hopes of finally bringing her soul some peace.
But it didn't work. Nothing worked. The haunting of Belapur village continues to this day. Because you see, Anjali's spirit, the Garbhavati Atma, she isn't looking for revenge anymore. She's not even looking for peace. Her powerful, restless soul is bound to that place by one single, desperate, and unanswerable question.
Mera bachcha kahan hai? Where is my child? That is the question she asks, night after night under that tree. It is a search that will never, ever end, for a life that was stolen before it even had a chance to begin. And it leaves you wondering, what's more powerful, the finality of death or a mother's unending love?